right, let's get it. Welcome to Chatting with Chief, hosted by Backpack Technologies LLC, a place where we talk about some of the hottest buzzwords and concerns in the IT and cyber worlds. Today's guest is Mike Maice from ARCHON, a khaki company, and I'm your host, Jason Blair from Backpack Technologies LLC. Mike is an Army Chief Warrant Officer, a retired Army Chief Warrant Officer, whose assignments include the United States Cyber Command, Army Cyber Command, and the Joint Communications Support Element, JCSC, and many others. All right, so today's topic is a little less known, but just as significant as the larger buzzwords for secure communications, and that is the Commercial Solutions for Classified, or CSfC. So we're going to jump right in. Hey, Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Jason. Hey, man, thanks for having me this afternoon.
Man, I appreciate you being on. Hey, before we jump right into the discussion, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about ARCHON, your role in the company, and why you're qualified to talk about CSfC?
Yeah, absolutely, Jason. So, as you said, my name is Mike Maice. I'm a retired Army Warrant Officer. Currently, now I fill the role of the Director of Product Development for the ARCHON product line at CACI. What makes me qualified for this role? Believe it or not, Commercial Solutions for Classified has actually been around since about 2012. And due to some of the assignments I had and some of the opportunities I had on active duty, I got exposed to the technology, the concepts, and the program very early in the process. And what we did at ARCHON and what we continue to try to do is really productize and create a simple, easy to deploy, and easy to repeat version of CSfC. So having now, over 10 years of experience in this space, doing 30, 40, 50 different installations for Commercial Solutions for Classified and multiple different environments, I have a lot of battle scars and fun stories from things gone wrong in the past. So what we're trying to do is try to make sure that, our service members and our federal agencies don't have to go through the pain that, frankly, I went through earlier in my career.
So, to know that it's been around for 10 years is it's amazing, right? So what exactly is CSfC, and how does it work?
Yeah, so the Commercial Solutions for Classified program is an NSA program, and what they do is they've created what they call capability packages. And each one of these capability packages target different implementations of Commercial Solutions for Classified that are relevant to federal agencies. And the core tenet of CSfC is about replacing NSA Type 1 encryption with commercial products that are off the shelf and commercial encryption. And they do that through engagement with industry. And one of the things that the reasons they went down that path was to let industry do what industry does best. And that's innovate and rapidly produce and meet requirements. Through that, what it became over time is, like I said, a bunch of different implementations. And those implementations are everything from secure wireless across your campus to remote work for classified systems to true kind of traditional Type 1 replacement, such as removing things like KG175 deltas or 250Xs out of your environments.
My follow-up question, like, what is a Type 1 encryptor? So basically it's a hardware device that's in between the end user device and the network to make sure that everything is secure and that nobody's snooping your information.
The big thing about the Type 1 encryption market is that the keying mechanisms and the governance of it is ran by the federal government, right? So like most GOTS produced and GOTS driven solutions, they follow the same procurement and development path that just takes more time, right? And because of that, you will run into supply chain issues. As bandwidth increases, suddenly that you won't be able to get access to things that can use that bandwidth. And that kind of constant cycling is really what drove the establishment of CSfC.
Now that's very interesting. This is a question I didn't have teed up, but it kind of makes it future proof in a way, right? So what are some of the benefits of using CSfC, and what are some of the drawbacks?
So from a benefit standpoint, one of the lessons learned during the COVID and the pandemic time was the government had to figure out really quickly how to tackle things like remote work, as an example. And you as a retired warrant officer, you'll understand this, but for kind of the group as a whole, could you imagine giving a type 1 encryptor to every senior leader in the Army to take to their house during the pandemic? I mean, can you imagine the amount of security incidents and, all types of chaos that would have come from that? And what CSfC allowed us to do is give users basically laptops that look and function similar to every other laptop they've ever touched in their life. Let them take it home and then use really any means of transport that they have available to them, whether that's their own, home local Wi-Fi, but also start to think about people that were living in their RVs using SpaceX terminals, right? Suddenly you had this ambiguous transport capability that, as long as it was IP based, you could travel across it. And I think probably that's one of the biggest benefits, is it gives you options to get away from kind of traditional military transport that brings capabilities such as remote work to the table. Another big benefit of it, Jason, is that there is a lot of work that has to be done to store a type 1 encryptor, right? So it's not just a matter of, let me give the boss a type 1 encryptor. It's let me give them a safe, let me give them a router, let me give them a couple other things, put it behind 2 locks, have a security guy go investigate his house. With CSfC, a lot of those controls just completely go away. And I don't think we have time to dive into all of that, but that's another one of the big benefits, is that over time, it does start to lower costs. Now, you ask what CSfC isn't. I'll tell you the 2 biggest misconceptions is, one, it's not cheap. The NSA did a really good job of, frankly, not making the 255 Novembers in the Army's life easy when it comes to this, because their focus was really targeted on securing the data either in transport or at rest. And because that was their focus, not only is it not cheap, it's also incredibly complicated to deploy initially. And the reason for that is because they require a lot of vendor diversity across the installation. So a good example of that is, one of the core tenets of CSfC is that you have to essentially the secure data travels through 2 VPN tunnels. Well, as part of the CSfC program, they require those 2 encryption devices, those 2 VPN devices, to be different vendors. So now you've taken your G6 office or your J6 office, whatever's appropriate for that organization, and you said, hey, I know you guys have traditionally been a Cisco shop, but now we need to sprinkle this other vendor in, right? And because of that complexity, and because of that, the fact that it's just not cheap to start, the first user is just expensive because of all the requirements. It scares people off historically. What you've seen since COVID is you've seen a push from vendors to include the ARCHON product line, but we are not the only one that is starting to build technology around managing these CSfC infrastructures. And the historic challenge was, a lot of people could build the CSfC network, but by the time they got done building it and were trying to hand it over to an O&M organization, all of that complexity became incredibly difficult to manage and scale over time.
Would you agree that once the standards are standardized, right? And that we're able to have, let's call them gateways, places where all of these different CSfC end user devices can terminate. Would that then become a benefit over type 1 encryptors, because now the complexity is kind of gone away, because the technology and the training and whatever criteria has now been something that's been standardized, rectified, and established?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things. I think when you start to talk about the price barrier specifically, the establishment of enterprise programs are really what's going to start driving the price down for organizations. So I'll use an organization like the Army as an example. Obviously, there's a lot of National Guard units out there and Army Reserve units out there that would love to have SIPRNet probably inside of their armories, but they may not have it for one reason or another, whether that's the cost that you would have to take on to run fiber and do all the things to turn a part of your armory to a SCIF is the issue, or just a pure financial issue of needing resources. historically, that's been a shockingly hard problem to solve. And what CSfC and these gateways being deployed allow to happen is now that organization doesn't have to go and buy a gateway anymore. They don't have to go and figure that out. They can just go buy the laptop, pay the price for the laptop and the recurring service as an example. And now you start to give users that were having to drive 100 miles just to check their SIPRNet email the ability to do that from their local armories or potentially even their local homes.
Yeah, I remember them days when in Afghanistan. But okay, so what are the different what are the different CFCC components, and how do they work together? If you can kind of describe that briefly, just kind of, I know you mentioned 2 VPN tunnels. Can you just go a little bit deeper?
I can. So that believe it or not, that could be probably a podcast on itself, Jason, just because every
Okay.
capability package has kind of different fundamental components that are required to meet those capability packages. So the products that you need to deploy, as an example, campus wireless access, is a completely different set of hardware than you need to deploy something like mobile access, which is targeted like remote work. But there are commonalities between all of the capability packages, and really they're centered around kind of two fundamental concepts. One, we discussed kind of the vendor diversity of the encryption piece to it. And the other core tenet is that every piece of data has to be encrypted twice in every scenario. So in the case of mobile access, the way you approach those two layers of encryptions changed from campus wireless, as an example. However, the rule of 2 layers of encryption applies across all the capability packages, and the same with the vendor diversity requirements.
So, Mike, I see you outside on the road all the time, and we talk, um, quite a bit. So, what would you say that people, when they approach you to talk about this solution, what do they normally get wrong?
Yeah, so I think when I talk to customers and kind of give kind of educational classes on CSfC, what I normally tell people if they're considering going down that path is whatever vendor they talk to, whether it's us, whether it's, pick another vendor, you should ask every vendor these 2 questions. One, how do I scale this when I transition from my 50 user pilot to my 500 user pilot, as an example? And then the 1B to that question is, what if I want to add an additional capability to the infrastructure that you're adding, right? That is one question, and that's talking about how you build it, right? Because a key component of being successful with CSfC is getting your gateway right the first time. Because anytime you have to start going back and making changes with the agency, you start to create these timelines and delays that cause problems. The second question that you should ask every trusted integrator that you talk to about your potential CSfC project is, okay, great, you've now delivered me a working solution. How do I manage it and sustain it and grow it in the future without you as the TI?
Mm.
And what you'll find in this space, the difference a lot of times between the good trusted integrators and the less experienced ones are they will have an answer to that second question of how to manage it, how to sustain it, and how to grow it. Versus if you've never done it before and you've never lived the challenges that do come from it, you'll find that they understand the capability package and they know the controls that they have to put in place, but what it takes to O&M it, they usually don't know.
Well, Mike, we coming up on time, but it's been great talking to you. And how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, first off, Jason, always thanks for having me, man. I love what you're doing for the community and the team right now. So anything I can do, obviously, to support you and your efforts, man, make sure you let me know. How to find me, the best way to get a hold of me is probably LinkedIn. And like a terrible podcast person, I do not know my LinkedIn off the top of my head, but I'll get it to you, Jason. Another option is, I will always respond to my emails. You can always email me at michael.maice@caci.com. And I'll respond 99% of the time to any emails. And then the last plug I'd like to make, Jason, you can edit it out if you'd like, but I have a personal goal in life to try to help reduce and do my part to help reduce things like veteran suicide specifically. So I challenge everybody listening to this podcast today, pick up the phone, call an old buddy who you may not have talked to in the past year or two, check on them. You never know, man, when your call may make the difference. So I'll leave it at that, Jason. Thanks, buddy.
No, hey, Mike, that's awesome. That is, dude. That I love it. I love it. Don't worry about it. It's gonna stay right up in here. I'm all about the veterans, and it's, and I'm a little biased. I love warrant officers because I'm one of them, but I do love my my other brothers and sisters in arms. So, hey, thanks for joining me, Mike, and if I'll talk to you about maybe doing another one to kind of do a little bit deeper dive on some of the things that we talked about. But until then, have a good one.